So upgrading smarter, not harder, the ERP transformation blueprint. So here's our agenda for today. We'll go through some introductions and some light housekeeping. We'll do a little Intellias overview. We'll get into the nuts and bolts around what you need to do to prepare for an upgrade, regardless of what system you're coming from. And then we will take some questions and conclude the webinar. All right, so I don't think I've seen Mr. Byer join us today yet, but my name is Debbie Sherman. I am a Financials and Supply Management Solution Architect here at Intellias for the Infor products, although I did mention we will be talking about any projects. And generally, Mr. Byer, who is our principal consultant, joins me, and we also have Chandra Heron on. So, about Intellias. So just give you a quick little rundown here. Intellias was established in 1999. We are an Infor Alliance partner. We have offices in both the Chicago and Dallas areas, and we are a team of full consultants that are certified in Infor Cloud, Infor products, as well as AWS, which is our Amazon services. We are specialized in Lawson and Cloud Suite upgrade projects, and we do offer professional service offerings such as cloud migrations and upgrades, and that's from any product to the Infor products, as well as system assessments and optimization, new module implementations, technical and functional application support, and system administration, which consists of installations and upgrades. Chandra, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think you've covered it.
Great. All right, so what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about the fact that your system is either in the process of making a decision to upgrade your current ERP, and why are you doing this? Well, support may be ending for your current ERP. So if you are an Infor client, then we know that the end of life for the server 2019 is January of 2029. And we know that Lawson's end of life support will be, or is currently scheduled for December of 2030. And then again, many of the others, PeopleSoft, Workday, Oracle, SAP also have different support end dates, depending on the version that you might be on. Also because change is progression, right? So we're looking to take advantage of application enhancements and new technologies, because with new technologies generally come new opportunities. We're looking for better performance within the ERP. We're looking for enhanced reporting. We're looking for user-friendly functionality, and we want new. So out with the old and in with the new. So how do we do that? How do we upgrade smarter, not harder? Well, we need to define a long-term roadmap. We need to develop a plan. We need to assign resources to put that plan into motion, and we need to identify target dates. So what is that roadmap to success? So that roadmap to success includes cleanup efforts or data scrubbing, which we'll go into each of these in detail. Whether or not you're going to redefine your organization, what opportunities are there for standardization and optimization, identifying pain points within the organization, and wishing upon a star, which basically is, what do I want in my new system? What do conversion efforts look like? What third-party applications are in play, and how are we going to identify what we're going to keep and what we're going to sunset? And then finally, the roadmap, the plan, resources, and a timeline. So again, let's start with the cleanup efforts, because that's most important. We see so many things with our clients around the data that's in their system, and this is really, really important. Whether you're an Infor client, whether you're running PeopleSoft or Oracle, and whatever system you have decided the new ERP that you're implementing, it doesn't matter. These things need to happen for any of those systems. Data is integral to your organization, right? So when you're looking at cleanup efforts, we want to look at our general ledger. We want to inactivate any components of your general ledger that are no longer used and that have no activity. And we suggest that within the last 12 to 18 months. We want to look at cash management. Inactivate any bank accounts that are no longer being used, which you have no transactions for any longer. And then make sure your bank statements are reconciled currently. This is another area. I think bank statements from a financial perspective tend to be something we don't put in the forefront. We tend to be several months behind. Get those current and be prepared. From a payables perspective, we want to inactivate or purge vendors and their vendor locations that have had no activity. Again, we recommend 12 to 18 months. If you are using one-time vendor functionality, then inactivate or purge the one-time vendors that are no longer being used. Review vendor statements and resolve any credit balances for invoices that are over a year old. We see a lot of this, and this also ties into reviewing and resolving your invoice not received. So an invoice not received, we get an invoice in the system, and if you're using the purchasing module, you can't match it to the purchase order because receiving has not been completed. Why is that? If you've got an invoice coming in the door, you should have already had that product or service received in your warehouse, at your location, whatever the case may be. So why hasn't receiving been done? Take a look at those things and what's going on with them. Is it an instance of the invoice was paid outside of the purchase order because the invoice didn't have the PO on it? So keep that cleaned up. We see a lot of things where there's a credit for a vendor, but you're never going to receive another invoice. So work with a vendor to get that credit resolved. Did they apply the credit internally to an invoice and that's why you don't have the invoice? Or do you need to request that credit in the form of a check and deposit it? So all that research can be done. On the receivable side, you want to resolve aged invoices that are older than 12 months by increasing your collection efforts, right? And performing write-offs if necessary. So look at those and find out why you have those outstanding. Much like payables, inactivate the customers that no longer have balances and again, have had no activity in the last 12 months. Take a look at payments that have come in and have not been applied. So you received, not applied. Why do you have checks received, not applied to invoices within your system? Was it a credit received from a vendor that shouldn't have come through AR? Take a look at those things. And then assets. Perform an inventory and start disposing assets. This is another area where we see many organizations, and because of lack of resources, don't dispose assets. They've reached end of life, they're fully depreciated, but they never dispose them off the books. Take a look at that. Get that resolved. So from a purchasing perspective, take a look at your requisitions. Why do I have unapproved requisitions sitting out there or unreleased requisitions? Is there an issue with the workflow? Did we go a different direction? Was a new requisition entered? Get those resolved and cleaned up. The same with purchase orders. Review open purchase order lines that are older than 6 months. Determine if it, again, was paid as a non-PO invoice and resolve those. And review unreleased receipts that are older than 30 days. Did somebody start to do a receiver and forgot and then did another one? Take a look at these things. A lot of times, especially if you're an Infor user, and then also from an Oracle perspective, when a purchase order is matched to an invoice, and say you have a line and you have the unit cost on that line is $1, but the invoice comes in at 90 cents. In many of the ERP systems, that line won't close because there's that 10% difference. Many organizations will put tolerances in place for over the cost of a unit cost on the line, but don't really ever set that up for the under cost, right? And so it leaves that line open, and then all of these PO lines that have that tiny discrepancy show up on your reports. Get those cleaned up and taken care of. Take a look at your item master. Review and inactivate your duplicate items or items that have no longer been used. And there's many reports across many of the ERP systems that will give you analytical information to show when the last time an item was actually tied to a purchase order or a requisition. Same thing with your inventory transactions, and you're going to see the same kind of commonality here within all the modules. Looking and reviewing unreleased transactions that are older than 90 days for inventory. Was this an issue where you couldn't transfer inventory from one location to another because you didn't have enough stock on hand and so it was never resolved? Take a look at those and get them resolved. Review expired contracts. Get those resolved. Take a look at your purchasing and your ship to locations. Again, inactivate those, much like vendors. Inactivate locations that are no longer valid or in use. And then from the purchasing side, look at your look at your received not invoice that's older than 6 months. Again, if someone has received against a purchase order, that invoice should be coming right in the door anywhere from a week to 10 days later max. So why is there a receiver out there that hasn't been matched to a purchase order and an invoice? Was the invoice paid without the PO? Is there an issue? Do we have a buyer message attached? Work with AP. I cannot tell you how important the collaboration between accounts payable and purchasing is when it comes to keeping purchase orders and invoices flowing through the system and not bottlenecking. But it's very important. All right. So here's some other things you'll want to do that aren't related to the actual data within the system, but around your processes and your RICE. So review your approval processes, right? Are they compliant with your financial policies? Was your financial policy changed at some point due to a new CFO coming in? But guess what? We never updated our approval processes. Do your levels of authority need to adapt with your growing organization? Are they compliant with the financial policy? Very important, because an ERP implementation of any kind is the prime time to start taking a look at these items and making the changes that your organization needs. All right, what about your RICE? So your RICE is reports, interfaces, conversions, and extensions. So reports, you want to get an inventory of reports and decide, I could have it, I should have it, I must have it, or it's no longer applicable. Define that up front. Provide samples of each of the report. Get that inventory together. Tell your implementation partner and the rest of the organization, what's the source of that report? So what system is it coming from? Who owns that report and what parameters you're using to run the report? And this is very important. This is very important in determining what of these items really need to move forward and what you no longer need. Interfaces. Inventory those as well. Define their use. What is the need of the interface and who owns it? Conversions. Conversions are very important. And we're going to talk about this in a lot of detail because it's a big thing when you're doing an implementation. Determine your historical conversion requirements. How much data are you going to need to convert? Consider any regulatory requirements you have. So if you're medical, many times Medicare, et cetera, requires that data be kept for 7 years. Dependent on if you're public sector, there's different requirements for grant reporting, et cetera. You've got to identify those. Very important. You don't want to find out down the line that you didn't convert data you needed. And then along with conversion comes archive strategy as well. So that whole conversation needs to occur. We're going to convert this much data. What are we going to do with the data we're not converting? What is our archive strategy for that? And does the ERP you're moving to offer have a chosen tool? Do they offer a tool to help you with this? Infor does. Oracle has a data integrator tool. Other ERPs like PeopleSoft and Workday have different options and several built-in tools depending on the data you're moving. So look into that as well. Extensions. So extensions are any customization within the system that doesn't fall under a report, an interface, or a conversion. It could be an approval workflow. It could be an automation tool or a different IPA that provides different data or moves data from one segment to another. Again, you're going to want to document the customized forms and fields that you currently have in the system so that you and your implementation department, your implementation partner can determine, do I need those going forward, or does current functionality within the ERP that we've selected provide that? So overall, what this cleanup effort does is determines what data you're going to keep, what RICE elements you're going to keep, and what's going to go away because it's no longer needed. So defining whether or not that new functionality can be replaced with existing can replace the existing customizations or extensions you have is very important. And any design documents that you currently have or flow charts are very helpful to your implementation partner. The more information you have on what they do, how they work, the better. All right, so let's talk about whether or not you want to redefine your organizations. And this is always a conversation that happens prior to an implementation. We're going to put in a new ERP. This is a great opportunity for us to reorganize our financial data, right? It's a perfect time to consider changes to the financial structure of your organization. So the first thing you want to do is identify what those want to be and what limitations you currently have. So what opportunities lie within the new ERP today? Today you might be limited. So if you're an Infor client, you know, and you're running Lawson, you know today that you only have the ability to have an accounting entity, an accounting unit, which is your department or cost center, an account, an activity, and an account category, right? And I can tell you, whether you're going from Lawson to the new FSM version or Lawson to Workday or whatever you're doing, there are additional dimensions of that general ledger distribution code in all of the other ERPs, including the new Infor version, right? For instance, the new Infor version has 10 finance dimensions that are user defined. So while a lot of organizations, I can tell you I'm working with a PeopleSoft client right now, they've got their location and cost center built into their department because they can't split it out into 2 dimensions. So imagine if your GL string today is an entity or a company, and then your department is, you know, combination of location and cost center, or maybe location and region. Imagine being able to split those out into their own unique segment and being able to report granularly at those levels, right? Whether you're healthcare, public sector, utility, whatever that case may be, education, this is an opportunity and all of them provide it. So you can talk about service lines, providers, trading partners, payers, cost objects, project categories. You can split that out into all different kinds of things. Take that opportunity to do it. Maximize flexibility with reporting. Very, very, very important. So many times you have to create custom reports because you don't have the flexibility within your organizational structure to be able to support that. And most ERPs can. So look into that. Make sure you're looking at that. And that can be done by creating an alternate chart. So you have a chart of accounts today that's across your organization. It's summarized and rolled up exactly how you want it. You got balance sheet, income statement within there. You got your assets, etc. I had a client that had to do a lot of Medicaid reporting. And for Medicaid reporting within the healthcare realm, they needed just specific sets of accounts. So we created an alternate chart and used that for reporting. So they didn't have to pull everything out of the system, manipulate the data by eliminating, utilize crystal reports to, you know, only try to offset, only pull specific data within summaries, but then having to maintain that every time there was a change to an account or a new account added. So there's all those things, so many things to think about. So don't look at it through a silo, look at it from the big picture. We can do the same thing with finance dimension hierarchies. So you have cost centers, they roll up. You have to specific regions, right? Or locations. We can also create different finance dimension hierarchies to support different financial reporting. And then always consider your regulatory requirements. You'll see that in here a lot. And the reason for that is because so many of our clients forget that piece of it. They think, I've got these regulatory requirements we need to do reporting for. We haven't found an ERP system that can support that yet. So they tend to put that on the wayside and think they can continue to do it manually. Well, maybe the system doesn't have all the components you need, but there will definitely be pieces of it that we can assist with, regardless again of what ERP system you're looking at. And re-engineer your chart of accounts to support organizational growth. Standardize it across the organization. Don't have a different supply account for every location. Have one. And then determine, based on the location element of your GL distribution string, what location it's for. So you can see how all of this is building blocks and can tie together. So you can have one supply account, but you can go in if you reorganize and you have location as a dimension of that GL structure. You can say, I want to see supplies for this location only. I want to see supplies for this cost center only. And you can do that from a very granular level. All right, so what about standardization and optimization? So whether or not you're going to do a reorg, this is also a really good time to look at standardizing and optimizing processes across your entire organization. So here's some things to think about when you're discussing standardization. Again, understand what the new ERP offers. If you've had demos from an ERP, you have a good idea of what it can do. I think if you have a good implementation partner, they will then work with you through discovery, and it'll initiate questions on, can we do this? Can we do that? And we see people get very excited about that, which is always fun when you're a consultant. The trick is to standardize where it matters most. But you also need to leave room for necessary differences. We understand that standardization across administration is going to be very different than standardization across the operational piece of your business. So there are going to be those necessary differences. But start with a clear why. And this is a big thing. You want to boost adoption by connecting changes to outcomes. And what that means is that the teams who have to sit and do the work will accept change much quicker if it's tied to outcomes they care about or involved in. And if you bring them into design early, you're going to be more successful. Your finance and operational users need to co-own the decisions and design. You don't want finance making decisions and the operational users going, you know what, they're just trying to shove this down my throat, because it happens. And we need to look at the whole big picture. So that's, excuse me, very important, and is really core to success. You want to focus first on core high impact processes. So pick a few processes that cut across the entire organization and get that right. Once you get that right, confidence builds and your users start to see, wow, I'm seeing the definite improvements and advantages to this system. And define a global template. Within your organization, what is truly standard? What has to be the exact same across the entire organization? What can be flexible? And by flexible, I mean, can it vary by region or business unit? And then what is going to require formal approval to deviate? And those are generally processes or business requirements that are tied to regulatory requirements. So something very important to consider there. Consider rolling out in phases or pilot one business unit or location. Then expand it out. Sometimes seeing is believing, right? And then here's another big one. It's really important when you're going to a new ERP, you can use this to force reducing unnecessary rice objects. If every region has its own reports or workflows, challenge whether they're actually really needed, or if it's just a habit they've done historically. Right? This is a great opportunity to retire those items that don't add real value to the organization. Not to mention the maintenance required. If you've got different business units running a very similar process, but there's 5 different processes, you're maintaining 5 different customizations. Make it one. There's almost always, when you're working with a technical team, you can do if this, then that. We do it in Excel all the time, right? With micros and macros. So if you can do that with an IPA flow, it can say, if it's this location, do this. If it's this business unit, do that. And based on identifiers, you can have similar processes in one workflow, depending on what that workflow is. And then again, data standardization, again, just as important as processes. Right? You want to align on the chart of account structure. I talked about that. You don't want one supply account for every single region. Have one. Define who's using it by other elements within your GL structure. Naming conventions, your customers, your vendors, your items, they should be similar. And then again, your data governance and ownership. right? Very important. Back it up with governance and accountability. Define who owns the standard processes long-term, how changes to those processes are going to be made, and what does compliance look like and how will it be monitored? If you do not do this, you're going to end up right back at square one where you were. And we see a lot of that because there is an understanding of how the process needs to occur. So change management within an organization when you're doing an ERP is also a very important thing to consider. All right, so optimization. Workflow approvals. Do you have them today? Why not? I would ask any one of our clients that. Why do you not have workflow approvals? I do not know of a single RP that does not have them. Is it because you haven't had the resources to do this? I cannot stress enough that everyone on our team and most implementation partners, their consultants are coming from the operational world at some point within their careers. So I've done many implementations as the client and many as a consultant. So I understand what it takes. I know that you have your day-to-day job. And in today's world, that means you're probably doing more than you ever have before because of constraints within every single organization. So resources are key. Now you, on top of that, you're being asked to be part of an implementation team. So not only do you have to do your day-to-day responsibilities, but you have additional duties. And it's not just going to be an hour or two a week. I cannot stress that enough, and I'm going to talk more about that at the end. But it's hard. I feel your pain, but it is hard to do. It's frustrating, it's time-consuming, and it's hard to do. But now's the opportunity to take the time to do the things you haven't been able to do. If you're going to spend the money on a new ERP, get it right. Take advantage of everything within it that you can. Very, very important. Because I tell you what, while you're going to be worked very hard during the implementation, once the implementation is over, system is stabilized, and you've gone through several months of closing that new ERP, you're going to find the proficiencies, all that front end work you did is going to pay off on the back end. It really, truly is. Yes, there's going to be change. People are going to be reluctant to change, but once they finally buy in, it's going to really, you're going to see that outcome. So consider implementing workflows. There's a huge benefit to your organization, whether that's with journal entry approval, payables invoice approval, receivables invoice approval, requisition and purchase order approval. There are so many opportunities there. And most ERP systems, I know Infor does, has approvals for creating a new asset. It's wonderful. Approval for creating a new customer, not just a vendor, but a new customer. Approval for requesting a new account. All that functionality is out there in most of the new big ERPs. Take a look at your journal entries. You'd be shocked to, and I'm sure maybe some of you see this, but journal entries are not always processed consistently across organizations. So look at that and how that process can be standardized or optimized. Are you optimizing your cash flow and utilizing the full capabilities of the system? I can tell you for Infor clients, that very rarely happens. Cash is one of those areas that either they have a separate spreadsheet that they're monitoring cash flow on, a separate application that's getting ready to be sunset to do this. Take a look at what the system can do for you. It's just one of those areas that does not get utilized to its fullest potential. Again, we talked about standardizing invoice and purchase order processing. Do you use imaging today or would you like to? There are many tools out there for that, including one we've developed that can be used to take an invoice in, review it, enter it in the system, even to the point where it can look at line matching for purchase orders. Lots of things out there. Depending on the size of your organization and the investment you're willing to make, there's different levels of tools that can work for you. How are payments processed and printed? Take a look at that process. Are there improvements that can be made there? Are you utilizing the system for receivables? This is another area where we see a lot of clients in Lawson, even in the new version of FSM or PeopleSoft. Again, I have a current PeopleSoft client right now who creating all of their receivables invoices in a spreadsheet and then enter a journal entry form. Don't do that. Upload them. Get them in the system. Let them be seen. Apply the payments to them. be able to run reports to see what's still outstanding. A spreadsheet can't do that for you. And again, this is any ERP. What policies and procedures do you have in place today to create your assets? Do you have the proper tools to track and report on those? Again, are they being manually entered? Are you using projects to their full potential? So we know that from Lawson, that's an activity. For others of you, I think PeopleSoft calls them projects, but it's an element of your GL distribution string. It's an additional piece that can monitor things like assets, construction in progress, you're building a new parking structure, and you want to get all of the costs for that. You're utilizing an ID number to compile all that information. Can be used for grants, for tracking restricted and non-restricted funds, for special internal projects like an audit. Think about all those things and how that can be used and optimized to give you the information you need out of the system. You know, the day of canned reports is pretty much gone by the wayside. In all of the new ERPs, they have things similar to list views where you can actually put in data that you want to see using contains, starts with, includes, does not contain, etc. Instead of just a canned report that then you have to pull out into Excel and eliminate the information or data that you don't want. Are your receiving processes up to par? What can you do to reduce your invoice not received and your received not invoice? And are you using strategic sourcing or mobile supply chain? If there's an interest in that, do it. These are great tools. Reducing cost to the organization with strategic sourcing. All right. So the next step in that process is now we want to identify pain points. So one of the most important considerations when you're preparing for an upgrade is identifying what procedures in your current day-to-day processes are causing the most pain to your employees in your organization. So if you're looking at opportunities for improving those processes, it will often and almost always result in increased productivity and optimization. But I'll tell you this, pain points shouldn't be based on who complains the loudest. Okay, it should be based on what are real, repeatable frictions, not one-off annoyances. So the best way to determine what those are is talk to the users and their supervisors in each of your general areas, GLAP, cash, purchasing. Ask them, where do you lose time every month? What requires manual workarounds? What's breaking during the process or at the end of the month or when you're doing reports? Then look at process breakdowns. Map a few critical workflows end to end, like procure to pay, which is from requisition to payment. Even if you don't have all those elements, put them in there to see what can be optimized to make it a better process, or record to report. Pain points will almost often show up as delays in the system, as rework, or handoff confusion. So let me give you an example. Your finance team is exporting data to spreadsheets to fix something and then having to re-upload it. That's a red flag, a great big red flag. Why is that happening? Find out, fix it. So another very important consideration is thinking ahead, right? So come to the table with everything you want. Vetting those ideas will eventually result in reducing manual efforts, increasing productivity within the organization, and in many cases, reducing cost. It affects the overall performance of the organization. And then use discovery to identify significant areas for improvement. Catalog those pain points we talked about, catalog the like to haves. Explain your processes in detail and provide documentation that supports the challenge you currently have or the opportunity you would like to see. Don't be afraid to ask for the world. I tell everybody, come to the table with every possible thing you want, right? Start out with the big, and then you can always negotiate down from there. All right, So next is your conversion effort. So we talked about conversion and how important this is, right? We need to, sorry, I was doing a time check. We need to ensure that the data that's coming from your legacy system is going to translate properly into your new ERP. This is critical to any organization's ability to do business. I think we all understand that. So decisions have to be made on what data to convert. Look at the data quality. How will the data be translated or crosswalked? And then testing and validation efforts. Not everything needs to come over. Less is more, guys. That's a great approach to start with. But again, you see regulatory requirements here. Got to think about that too, whether it's in the conversion effort or whether it's in your archiving strategy. Okay, cleanup is going to be instrumental in this as well. You don't want to bring over garbage, right? You want the data that you're converting to be logical, appropriate, and cleansed. Garbage into the new system means garbage out in the reports. Defining your mapping and transformation rules. Again, another key area. Define how every single element's going to be translated from old to new. This includes your charts, your customers, your vendors, your structures, the units of measures that you're using on the purchasing side. Small mismatches can really create problems down the road. And then don't underestimate your RICE objects tied to data. So many times we're in discovery, we've done discovery, we're moving on to design validation testing, and there's always surprises. We're always prepared for them, but somebody forgets something because they're like, oh my gosh, how does that data get in the system? Oh yeah, it's coming from this third party over here. You'd be surprised. Generally, we'll try to identify those up front, but sometimes that does not always happen. So, custom reports, interfaces, and enhancements often depend on specific data formats and fields. It's important to identify those. And if those change during conversion, again, that downstream process is going to break unless they're updated in sync with each other. So we always stress, validate, validate, validate. Such an important thing to do, right? That's going to guarantee that the data that came from your legacy system into the new system was transformed correctly into the new structures, the fields, and your business logic in your new ERP. So when you're doing conversions, there's usually multiple iterations for testing, generally minimum 4 to 5. And that first one is going to validate, the first one's going to be done to validate your crosswalks and your mapping and make sure that those are good, because then down the road, those become critical to your go live readiness, right? So you're doing that iteration of converting the data and mapping it each time to identify those small mismatches that can then be fixed. You generally will then do a mock conversion, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a mock go live. And you want real user validation. And we'll generally walk our clients through exactly what a go live looks like. We don't do it in the tight time frame you would do a go live cutover. We do it usually within a week because obviously you have another job. You're still using the current legacy system. So we spread it out over the week just so you have a feel for what that go live cutover is going to look like. And because of that, you want to make sure you have a proper testing plan and cutover plan in place that entails both IT and departmental users. So very important. And then your third-party application review. So we talked about this. This is with RICE, and you want to determine, first thing you want to look at when you're looking at third-party applications, what problem does this solve today? Not what it solved for 5 years ago. What is it doing for us today? Does my new ERP cover this functionality natively, making the third-party app redundant? Then look at the actual usage versus the assumed importance. You may have someone who says this is very important, but guess what? Do you know how many times I've had somebody tell me that and we go in and look and they haven't run the process or the report in a year? Let's be real. It's not important if it hasn't been run for a year, right? So look at that. Pull the login statistics, your transaction volumes, or integration activity. Find out really how important is it. Take a look at the business value versus the cost and the risk. Is there licensing or maintenance costs associated with it? Can we customize something in the new ERP that would replace it for less of cost with the same value and less risk because it's maintained in the same system? What's support dependency? Do you know how many times I hear we haven't changed this because nobody knows how it works? The person that knew left the organization. That's a huge risk. We all have it, every one of us, everywhere. So what's the risk exposure? Around security, compliance, outdated tech. We all know that AI is a big thing and all the new ERPs are utilizing it, right, to ensure risk is at a minimum. Determine how it fits into your future state architecture compatibility. Every external system you're using should justify its existence. It shouldn't be there just because it's easier. It shouldn't be there just because we don't have time to change it. Remember what I talked about earlier? This is the perfect time to do it. Yes, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, but in the end, it will pay off, right? And nothing without pain, right? Nothing's worth it. Then financial teams should ask, what's used to create my journal entries today? Can that be replaced with out-of-the-box functionality? There are some amazing third-party applications out there that can do all kinds of things with journal entries. I'm not saying there isn't, but are you using one when you're really not using its full existence and can do it within the ERP? These are areas where you can optimize. How are bank accounts reconciled? All of the new ERPs, including Infor, have some sweet reconciliation. Wonderful technology to do this. All different kinds of things. And I'm not talking about just what checks cleared. I'm talking about sweep accounts. I'm talking about ACH and EFTs, everything. Wonderful. Are your approvals done in another application? Why is that? Again, there are some great third-party applications out there that can do that, but can the ERP do new functionality? So perhaps you're using a technology that does the approvals and the invoice, OCR, and the payments. Well, does the current ERP system do all that too? Because generally that is in your initial licensing. And I know with a third party, you're generally going to have licensing and support costs. So take a look at those things. Can IPA flows be created to transfer data between systems instead of using hubs or SFTP sites? And then again, look at those applications that are reaching end of life or may no longer be supported. Can the ERPs provide a solution for that? All right, so finally, roadmap, resources, and timeline. Again, we've got everything fixed. We're working on cleanup data. If you don't plan to upgrade your ERP until 2027, now's the great time to start cleaning up data. Get it done as far in advance as you can, as much of it as you can. But define a long-term roadmap. You've identified what needs to be done. It's time to consider how you're going to get there and when. What's that timeline? So define that long-term roadmap, right? This is going to be your decision framework for how the system and the processes will evolve over time. What is your future state vision? What does better actually look like for your organization? What's the work effort to get there? What is my phasing strategy, if any, going to be? And what does implementation look like start to finish? Right? So stabilization is important for fixing issues, optimizing performance, optimization for process improvements and automation, and then innovation, advanced analytics, AI, new capabilities, all very important. But it all starts with that foundation of your core ERP, right? This right here. The foundation is your core ERP. You want to look at scope and priorities. What your must-haves are for go live. Make sure they're measurable. You want measurable outcomes. What is your RICE strategy? What is the plan for change management? Cannot tell you how important that is. When you're doing an ERP, communication is key. The users, down to the very lowest level, need to understand what is happening with the system they are currently using and how that's going to change going forward. Change management is key. If you do not communicate, they will not buy in. Develop that plan, Assign the tasks, assign your resources, right? Again, resources, we're all lacking them, but we've got to make sure that the resources we assign understand what's ahead of them, how their workload's going to change, why they've been chosen. And generally, those are your subject matter experts. So a lot of times the key people within the department, supervisors, maybe system admins that also have a functional type of role. And then have a target-based timeline, right? That consists of data conversion, testing. What are the blackout periods? You really want to identify those. It's very important. They should never be a surprise. And what third-party dependencies you have. So consider the scope and the complexity of that scope. What do the data conversion efforts look like? How many testing cycles are we going to have? Because generally you'll have a CRP, which is your first look at the system. It's conference room pilot. It's a vanilla version using a very specific set of your data to give you an idea of what the system looks like. And I am very tied into doing this in a building block perspective because you don't want to overwhelm your users, right? Make sure you have ample time to perform those tasks. Again, considering your resource availability and the blackout periods, we all have them. Quarter ends for specific reports, especially around regulatory requirements. Year end, 1099s, W-2s. Regardless of what your fiscal year end is, we still know December 31st is an important date for all of us. Right? Build in contingency. Build in milestones with measurable outcomes. Your ERP roadmap should never end at go live. It should be a guide for how to improve every quarter as you stabilize the system and move forward. All right. So what are the keys to a successful implementation? Prep work, preparedness efforts. What you do ahead of time is going to make all the difference and will determine your organization's upgrade readiness and success. Resource availability. I won't harp on that again. We've talked about that a lot, but ensuring the right balance is very important. A realistic expectations, a realistic timeline. Are you ready? Did you obtain the goals you wanted prior to starting the implementation? What percentage of time can resources apply to the project? Okay, you want to make sure you set yourself up for success. Focus on discovery and design. Discovery is essential, and it's almost always not given the time needed. Okay, you really want that 360 approach to ensure you've got the building blocks for that successful new ERP build. And if you're successful in design and build, then you're going to be successful when you deploy the system. You want a flexible approach. Be open-minded. Don't get stuck in a rut. Trust me, I'm a person sometimes resistant to change, but you don't want to get stuck in a rut. The enhancements are so valuable to an organization. You really want to be open to adopting a new standard, maybe an out-of-the-box process versus what you had previously. You don't have to recreate what you already have. Differentiate yourself in your organization. And then, of course, collaboration and creativity are very important. Whatever you do, ensuring that you select the right ERP and the right implementation partner really is important. You should be interviewing your implementation partner just like you interview a new staff accountant. You need to make sure they're a good fit. Do they have the business acumen and experience that you need? Right? And do they have the ability to collaborate and think outside of the box? Those are all equally important factors when choosing who you're going to work with to do your implementation. All right, so that's pretty much it for that. I will tell you for the latest news and webinars, you can follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Following this, we will be sharing the PowerPoint and the recording will be put out on both YouTube and LinkedIn. Maybe not LinkedIn, just YouTube. Chandra, help with that one. Do we put this on LinkedIn as well?
We'll put it on YouTube and then we'll send it out to everyone
Perfect.
after in the next day or so.
Fantastic.